Okay. All right. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here with a gentleman who has offered to give us his journey with his musical vocation, avocation in life. And I'm going to let him introduce himself. So, sir, what is your name and what instrument do you play?
My name is Jimmy Spencer, and I started off on saxophone. That was my major instrument throughout college, but I also picked up drums and percussion along the way. So I consider myself a saxophonist and a percussionist.
Okay, cool. When did you learn how to play those instruments?
I was about 10 years old. I started saxophone when I was 10. And then when I was about 15, I started percussion. And I never stopped doing both. I always kept learning and growing with both instruments.
That's pretty cool. So, why did you choose those instruments?
Well, I chose saxophone because, quite frankly, two of my best friends were doing saxophone. I was originally going to do trombone. And
Oh,
when my two friends said, "No, we're playing saxophone," I was like, "Okay, I'll do it." So that's kind of how that happened. And then over the long run, my two friends quit band, but I stayed in band.
oh, that's
Now,
good. Good choice.
when I when I started playing drums, it was more of a matter of I was in the band hall one day, and one of my drummer buddies had brought his drum set in to play with the pep band. I was playing saxophone with the pep band, and I just remember during a break, I was standing behind his drum set looking at it, and for some reason, it just kind of clicked in my head. I can do that. And
Yeah.
that was really what made me want to do percussion. That, and also I wanted to play in a lot of rock bands too.
Oh, yeah.
So I figured I would diversify, do the jazz and classical stuff on saxophone and do all my rock music on drum set.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. So, who inspired you to become a performing musician or teach music?
Well, I would say it would have had to been my high school band director, who was also my middle school band director. My band director we went to a small school. So the band director was responsible for everything, beginners, middle school, and high school. So I would say probably from a teaching aspect, it definitely my band director was a huge influence on me. It's kind of hard to really narrow it down to just one person as far as who inspired me to perform.
Mhm.
It was a collaboration of a lot of many different artists, probably as far as the performing part of it, probably a lot of MTV at that time in the 80s. A
Oh,
lot
yes.
of, yeah, MTV
Oh, yeah.
definitely inspired me. And then as I made friends later, they started turning me on to other music that maybe you wouldn't see on MTV so much. Like I can remember bands like Kansas, Jethro Tull, and Rush. That was some of the first bands that were mentioned to me when I was a young drummer.
Mhm.
So I guess you could say I started, expanding my horizons outside of MTV when uh, when I started playing percussion, basically.
Yeah. So, you kind of touched upon that question, which is how did you get to this point in your life musically? Please briefly share your journey from the beginning to now. So, you kind of talked about how MTV, got you
Uh-huh.
started and so forth. And I know you've been into several bands, especially in Austin, Texas, and probably Louisiana and where else. But can you kind of briefly share that with us?
Yeah, that was I got into college, and even before college, I always wanted to play live. That's what it was about for me. I just wanted to play live. I had very little experience playing at that time, had very little experience at even attending concerts. Where I grew up, you just didn't have access to live music that much. So
Right.
whenever there was an opportunity, it was a big deal. And it was just something that just I got addicted to. It's like I want to do that. So when I started college, that was the perfect opportunity. There were more people that shared my ambition in
Mhm.
college
Yeah.
than say when I was in high school. So it was just a matter of just meeting people, finding people that like the same music, or that they at least had the same vision. Didn't even have to necessarily like the same music, as long as they had the same vision that I had, which
Right.
was just to go out on stage and play the best music possible. And at that point, it quickly got ingrained in me that if I'm going to do this, I need to be serious about it. You're on stage performing in front of people, you want to sound and look good. So just many years of playing with other bands, everything from blues to rock to country. It doesn't matter what genre you play. Every genre contributes to yourself as a musician. So just
Definitely.
many years of doing that and meeting people, that's a key right there, meeting people. And one opportunity led to another. And so I've done everything from the typical barroom gigs, 4 hour long sets to play.
Yes,
Yeah, know about that.
I've been there.
Yeah. And even off to other things like playing musicals, getting to travel out to California to play a little mini tour out there. I've done cruise ship gigs, all with really great musicians.
Yes,
So,
definitely.
and along the way, I've even got to meet some of my heroes, and even got to play and record with some of my heroes too. So
That's awesome.
yeah.
Wow, that's pretty impressive. So, share a time musically when you were challenged and had to dig deep down for perseverance and resilience in order to overcome and prevail. I know there's
I've,
probably many to choose from, but
there are many to choose from, but the one that comes to mind is one that actually happened within about the past year. I was hired to play a musical, and without complaining too much, let's just say the sound guy was not very accommodating. Um, he just didn't. He was not a musician,
mm,
which is odd because a lot of the sound guys I work with are musicians,
mhm.
but I do know that the non-music musicians that are sound engineers exist. But he basically just he didn't want to deal with my sound, as a drummer who's enclosed, because the way that it was set up, I was enclosed in a plexiglass shield,
Ooh,
and he just didn't want to work with me on sound. It's very difficult to play when you can't hear the other musicians outside of the plexiglass. And it was one of those things where uh, I could have easily let my temper get out of control, but I had to remain professional and remember that the bottom line was the performance. The audience doesn't know what's going on behind the scenes, and they don't care neither. All they
right,
know is they're spending their hard-earned money and giving away their time, which you can't get back. You cannot
right.
get time. That's all they know, is that they're spending their money and their time to come see you, and they want to see a show. So despite the lack of cooperation I had from my sound guy, I had to just dig in and be a professional, and the show must go on. It's a very cliche thing, but that's what it boiled down to. The show must go on. So I just had to dig down and get creative at how am I going to overcome this obstacle, a very big obstacle, but I overcame it.
That's awesome. Everything that you're saying is the stuff that the students had studied and the touring music industry careers, all of that stuff for perseverance and maybe people not wanting to work with you and digging deep down and coming up with creative ways to overcome that. So I'm glad you touched upon a lot of that so the students can see that come to fruition. That's
Yeah.
awesome. So if you had an opportunity to do something differently musically, what would it be?
Ooh, you know, that I don't know, because there's so much of my life that is about music. But if I was to do something that's not musical,
Well, musically, if you had to do
oh,
something musically
oh,
differently.
misunderstood your question. You know, I could really get into booking, um, being a booking agent, because when I started dealing with bands that were original because formats, because you've got cover bands that
Right.
play music that's already been done, and then you have the original bands, who write their own music, and it's similar, but it's not similar. And when I started getting involved with bands that were more about original music, I started getting into booking also, mainly because I was the only one in the band that would do it. Most musicians have a very difficult time booking their own shows.
Yeah.
So one of those things where I knew the people, And I knew the other guys weren't going to do it. So I decided to book the gigs. And as a result, not only did I book shows for my own band, but I also ended up basically being a talent scout or like a talent promoter. I ended up putting the whole show together. So there were times where, if I was playing a show and there were 5 bands on the bill, I booked all 5 of those bands. And that
Wow.
happened several times. So if I wasn't playing in a band, I think I would have a good time just booking shows, being a booking agent.
Right. I'm so glad you said that because once again, we talked about concert promoters, talent promoters, booking agents, all of that. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
So, what advice would you give to a young musician starting off in middle school band, choir, orchestra, mariachi, guitar, any kind of middle school young musician just starting out?
I would say, first of all, I would practice patience and practice, and maybe do it in the other order. Practice and then be patient, because things are not going to come to you immediately. You may find some things here and there that come to you really fast, but I guarantee you're going to find some things that it takes a little bit more time to learn, and you can't force the learning to happen. It has to happen naturally and over time. So you practice and then be patient. Also, I would encourage young musicians to go out and be proactive in learning about your instrument. Don't wait for somebody to spoon feed it to you. Take it upon yourself to go out and learn on your own. You'll end up learning more that way. You'll end up discovering more things that way also.
Yeah, definitely.
Plus in this day and age, with everybody having access to the internet, I mean, everything is available now. Whereas when we were younger, there was no internet. So, it was a lot harder to go out and find music, find things musically that related to you. It was a lot harder to do it back then. But now with the internet, everything is at your fingertips.
Oh, yeah,
So
definitely.
you use tools.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. I totally agree with that. So today, what is your vocation and what is your avocation?
My vocation is I am a band director. I've been a middle school band director, I've been a high school band director, and I have been an all around band director. When I say all around, I mean campuses that only have one director, and that one director is responsible for beginner band, middle school, and high school. So that's the capacity I'm working in right now. I work on a K through 12 campus,
Ooh,
and which is actually good in the long run. But so I have all the students there on one campus. I don't have to travel or anything like that. So I see my beginners, which are 6th graders, and then I have
okay.
7th graders. And then the high school band, the main performing band, is actually 8th grade through 12th grade. A lot of the small schools will do that for numbers reasons. They'll include 8th graders in their high school band. The one that I went to when I was a kid, we marched 7th grade through 12th grade all in one day.
Wow.
But we
Wow.
started band in 5th grade. So,
Yeah.
but we had
Well, what
at
does
least,
your K through 5 do? Is there a separate music teacher for that?
yes, there is
Okay.
a music teacher that teaches general music to those students.
Oh,
So
okay.
K
Gotcha.
through 5, they have general music classes. And then 6th grade, they have the option of joining band.
Right. Cool. So what is your music avocation?
Uh, Being a sideman and playing in other bands for 26 years now. I have, when I'm not teaching music in the day, I'm always hunting for other musicians to play with. So over the years, I've advertised myself as a sideman for hire. So there's people that will call me up and say, "Hey, I'm putting a project together and I think you'd be the perfect guy for it." And, a lot of times it works out and sometimes it doesn't. That's just the way the music business goes. It's just, it's the same kind of ideology in the entertainment business in general.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
you're always trying to find those people that have the right chemistry. And then also there's times where some friends of mine will call up and say, "Hey, my drummer's sick. Can you come play tonight?"
Ooh,
Yeah,
fun times.
you get no rehearsal. Sometimes you don't even know what songs you're playing until you're up on stage. A good example was when I did the cruise ship gig. We were out on the ocean for a month, and with the exception of one of the lead vocalists, nobody was from Austin. It was just me and one other person. The others were from other areas of the States. And the leader of the band tried to get a rehearsal together, but it never worked. So our rehearsal was actually our first show.
Whoa. How
Yeah,
did that go?
it went good. I
Okay.
mean, that's part of being a professional musician, is that, mistakes were made, but how you make the mistake is important also. You generally want to make the mistake and make your audience think that was intentional.
Right.
Whenever they tell you they don't notice the mistakes, that's a good thing. So any
Yep.
mistakes that were made, they were very tiny mistakes and only mistakes that the people on stage would know about. But as far as the audience was concerned, we had been rehearsing for a long time. And as a
That's
matter of fact,
beautiful.
we even had people say that when we tell them, no, this is our first night, we didn't even do a rehearsal. And they said, wow, you sound like you guys been playing together for a long time. No, first night.
That's pretty cool. That says a lot about the people that are in the group. That's really awesome. So, where do you go from here? Briefly share your musical ambition for your next journey in life.
Well, for 20 years, I had been living in Austin, Texas, which is known as the music capital of the world, as most metropolis areas are. They usually have a good, a good arts district, or whether it's Houston, Dallas, Los Angeles, whatever. Usually those big cities have adequate music scenes. I've recently moved back home to my hometown, which doesn't necessarily have as much musically going on. But for the past 26 years, I've worked real hard at building up my connections and my network of people. So once this pandemic goes away and everybody starts recovering from this snow and ice that we've had, my plan is to reignite my sideman gig and start traveling a little bit more. So I feel like that I can now operate out of my small hometown, and I can still go to Austin and play. I can still hop over and go to California and do the mini tour in October like I normally do. I can still travel off to Florida and get on a cruise ship. I can still go up to the East Coast and play up in Maryland. So I'm looking at doing the same thing, but just doing it in a different way. Basically being able to base myself wherever I want to. Instead of having to live in Austin, Texas, I don't have to live there anymore.
Right,
I
right.
can small town, and I'll still get phone calls. I'll get opportunities to travel. That's really what's going to boil down to, is a lot more traveling. And
Right.
there are small circuits here in the southwest part of Louisiana that I can get on and get my weekends filled that way too. So just basically the same thing, just broader. Instead of just concentrated in Austin, I want to broaden out more to cover more territory.
That's awesome. You're probably going to get a lot of gigs and jobs going that way. And it sounds like a lot of passion for sure. And I'm really glad you mentioned about the networking and having relationships, building those relationships with different people around the country, so that, you can get a gig, or someone knows, hey, Jimmy Spencer
Yeah.
plays drums. We can, we need him right now, or maybe we can get him for next weekend or whatever. That's beautiful, because that's something our students looked into. And a lot of the paperwork that we were looking at said that
Mhm.
very same thing. So it's nice when a live person reiterates that, and beautiful, perfect. Well, that's all the questions I have. Did you want to add anything else?
I actually did, when you were talking about the importance of networking.
Yes.
One other thing I would suggest to young musicians, as when you're networking, always be positive.
Yeah.
Always have a good attitude, no matter what's going on. I have been in quite a few situations where there's been one member in the band that might not be in a real good mood. And while they may have a right to not be in a good mood, it can still put a damper on the show. It can bring the other musicians down.
Right, right.
And this is still this is still an industry that relies heavily on word of mouth. So if you're not a pleasure to play with, word will get around eventually.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
got to be very careful, be very professional, network, always be positive. Um, yeah, just positivity. That's the key word in that. The happier you are, the more positive you are, the more people are going to want to play with you.
Right.
And
I mean,
music,
that's your reputation. Your reputation's everything.
exactly. And musicians, it's one of those things where even if you only play with a musician one time, you're their friend for life, you know. So that's what I wanted to add to that.
Well, thank you. That is beautiful. That is perfect and a nice way to end this interview. So, Mr. Spencer, I thank you so much for giving our students an eye into your world of playing live and also teaching. So that's awesome. Thank you so much
Awesome.
for your time.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Thank you, sir. Bye-bye.